Friends, as you know, the Indigenous are now supposed to be our moral exemplars in every aspect of life. Well, most refreshingly, Father Jenkins here, for one, isn't buying the con. Amazing! How refreshing! I'll turn up the volume in a second. This is very interesting. You hear something here from Father Jenkins, which is rare today. As you know, we're basically now supposed to worship the Indigenous peoples, wherever they are. Oh, except for European Indigenous peoples. No, they need to be spurned and they need to be erased. But everyone else, if you're Indigenous, oh, you occupy the moral high ground by default. And of course, we're expected to get on board with the mantra, Asia for Asians, Africa for Africans, but white countries for everyone! White ethnomasochists, above all, love this genocidal mantra. It's all a load of BS. Total nonsense. Aren't you tired of nonsense? I am. Here, Father Jenkins focuses on a particular aspect of the Indigenous. Rarely do we hear about the toxicity, the demonic toxicity of the Indigenous. Especially from anti-Pope Francis. Oh, you'll never hear him say anything negative about the Indigenous heathens. No, instead, he'll participate in their demon-summoning ceremonies, such as with Pachamama, such as recently in Canada. So if you want to hear some really real talk about the Indigenous, you're not going to hear it from Francis and his diabolical Novus Ordo anti-church. But you will hear a bit of it here from Father Jenkins, an actual Catholic priest. As for me, I have nothing against Indigenous people as such. What I reject is the notion that I am in any sense supposed to worship or defer to the Indigenous. They do not occupy the moral high ground. They are heathens. They have produced no great works of art. Are there any Beethovens among the Indigenous? Are there any Shakespeares among the Indigenous? Was it the Indigenous who spread the light of Christ throughout the world? Am I Eurocentric? Absolutely. Unapologetically. Does this make me a thought criminal today? Absolutely. Do I care? No. I'm honored to be a thought criminal today when you are out of step with a degenerate society and you are in touch with your sane ancestors. No need for any apologies. As an Indigenous person I admire said, "It is no sign of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." Here's Father Jenkins.
They want to weaken our wills. And if there's one thing that we can do that has a noticeable effect on weakening our wills, it's using drugs. Using drugs actually does just weaken our wills so much that it makes us much more subject to diabolical influence. If we see a rise in diabolical influence in the world, we see a rise in diabolical possession of the world. It's because people are actually leaving the door open, as it were. Remember the parable that our Lord told about the unclean spirit that went out of the man? Read that in the gospel, you'll see exactly what I mean. And people are actually flinging the doors open to the devil right now about all of this drug use. We're going to expect that as drug use increases, we're going to expect much more influence of the devil and more cases of possession. There's a reason why so-called indigenous cultures, which we're all supposed to have such, admiration for across the board, because they're indigenous, I guess, whatever that means, really, in the light of history. But they all involved animism and drug spirits, right? These are not blessed spirits that prowl through the world seeking the ruin of souls. They're not saints, the souls of saints that do that. And all of these cultures also use drugs. Drugs featured prominently in these so-called cultures. And they would use these drugs in order to, but I guess they'd say, expand their minds and open their minds to the spirit world. and allow that spirit world to influence them. It's very, very dangerous, Tom. You see us and all of these ideas that they want to communicate with the spirit world. They realize that marijuana is not only a gateway to other drugs, but it can be a gateway to other things too.